in his heart, that he would not defile himself with a portion of the king's meat. All the other young men, they were all Jews. Every one of them that came that were taken into captivity, all of them brought before to the king. Those that were taken and brought before King Nebuchadnezzar, every single one of them had opportunity to eat the portion of the king's meat. But Daniel said, not me. I'm not going to do it. So, verse 9 says, now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king. Because Daniel, because he purposed in his heart, in verse 8, he went to the prince of the eunuchs, and it says he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. He said, look, you know, I appreciate all that the king is trying to do with us. I understand he's trying to make us healthy, or trying, you know, he's given us a certain diet. He's trying to train us. But this doesn't work for me. I have a religious conviction that does not allow me to do this. Would you respect that? That's character. And so the prince of the eunuchs said, okay, but you know you may get me in trouble. I may lose my job over this. He says, just trust me. Everything will be fine. And so he says, okay. In verse 10, the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink, for why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall you make me endanger my head to the king. Then said Daniel to Melzar, verse 12, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Then let our countenances be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, as thou seest deal with thy servants. So he consented to them in this matter, and proved them 10 days. In verse 15, and at the end of 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Verse 15, at the end of the 10 days, verse 16, then thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse. Did God honor him because he maintained his character? Yes or no? Yes. He had made decisions that this is what I will do and this is what I won't do. I am going to be faithful to this. I am going to be, this is a responsibility. Do you understand the word responsibility? You young people especially. Define to me responsibility. Okay, that's being responsible, yes. What is a responsibility? In light of that definition, what you just said. Okay? It's doing what you're supposed to do, doing what you're expected to do. It's a responsibility, okay? So in other words, there's an expectation at home, okay? Clean your room. Imagine that. The demands of parents, oh my, okay? Clean your room. That to us as parents, when we were raising kids, that was a responsibility. We told our kids, we're not coming in and we're not picking up your mess. We're not making your bed. And I've known people that have, you know, made their kids' beds, whatever. If you don't learn responsibility at an early age, you're going to be lost all your life. My dad was given responsibility on the farm, he and his uncle, to drive tractors and plow fields at 10 and 11 years old. Now, they did some stupid things, but they actually did the work of men. My grandfather could depend upon my uncle and my father at 10 and 11 years old to do the work of grown men because they'd learned responsibility. They had a character, they had work ethic that had been instilled in them. They had an uncle, Uncle Buster. I don't remember much of Uncle Buster other than my derogatory remarks that my grandfather used to make about Uncle Buster, okay? And they were one time at the lunch table, and he said to my dad and said to my uncle, he said, Dan and Dale, he said, go out, he said, go on, he said, go up and, it's time to irrigate, go get it done. And he goes, oh, he said, they're kids. He says, they're never going to get it done. And he was just in disbelief. And so a few hours later, my grandfather says, let's go check. And the fields were done in half the time that they expected them to be, and they were out playing. They had already done the irrigating, and they were down at the slough playing. And it frustrated my Uncle Buster to no end. People need to learn responsibility in the work of God, as well as in the business world. And so Daniel, because he was a man of character, considered his responsibilities both to men and to God. And he took care of maintaining those responsibilities. He was faithful. He could be depended upon. So he maintained his wisdom, and he maintained his character. He was a man of integrity, and he was a man of faithfulness. But not only did he do those things, but he maintained his faith. Look at verse 10. Going back to our text, Daniel chapter 6 and verse number 10. He maintained his faith. Verse 10 says, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, what had happened? Well, if you read verses 5 to 9, you read what happened. They hated Daniel. And so the two other princes, the two other presidents and the 120 princes, behind the back of Daniel, in jealousy, knew that the law of the Medes and Persians, once it was written and once it was signed, could never be altered. Meaning that for however long that time, that there was no way to get around it. There was no loophole, there was nothing. And so they came up with a grand scheme that they would go to the king, to Darius, and they would ask him that nobody could ask any request of any type to any god or to any man other than Darius for 30 days. And they told the king that all of them knew it. They lied. Daniel did not know what was going on until after it was signed. So we pick up the story in verse 10. The king signed it. It was not alterable. So verse 10 says, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, in other words, word came back, ha! Guess what? The law passed. You can't ask God for anything for 30 days, Daniel. So Daniel took his Bible and he went over to his room, whatever Bible that he had, because the whole Bible was not written at that time, set it over on the shelf, and he forgot about it. And he closed his window and closed the shades, and he just sat there feeling sorry for himself. And for 30 days, he just was depressed. Right? That's not how the story goes. Oh, okay. No. Daniel continued to maintain his faith. Going back to Daniel chapter 6 and verse 10, the Bible says that he went into his house, and his windows being open in his chamber toward Jerusalem, which was his practice, he kneeled upon his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God. Now look at this next phrase. As he did aforetime. He maintained his faith. Even in adversity. Even in hard times. When no one else cared and the law had even been written and signed and declared, this is illegal. And even with the consequence. Now let's get to the consequence. Let's look what this decision, maintaining his faith in spite of the law, let's look at what the consequence was. Verse 12 says, Then they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, save thee, of thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, This thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not. Now that's stressed throughout this text. There was no way around this law. And no matter what Darius would want to do, because not thinking he signed this, there was not even anything he could do as the king to change it. Verse 13, Then answered they and said before the king, That Daniel, which is of the children of the captivity of Judah, regardeth not thee, O king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day. How would they know that? They knew that before they had the law signed. See, he had maintained his faith all along. This is not anything new. And that's what we need to understand as we live the Christian life. He changed not. He did not change. He maintained his wisdom, he maintained his character, and he maintained his faith no matter what was going on, no matter what laws were passed, no matter what the times, no matter how difficult it was, he continued to walk with God. So did he die? He didn't know that. He didn't know what was going to happen. He trusted God. He believed God. The Bible tells us that. But he was not going to sacrifice his faith. Now let's ask the question. And this is an if, and it could be a big if. But it would not be a surprise if in America there were certain things that the law tells us we cannot do anymore. They're already pushing the envelope right now in our state. A baker, thank God he did this. Same-sex couple came into his bakery and ordered a cake. He refused to make it. You know what? My wife's father that only happened one time. He made a cake for a couple like that. He did not know it. And he was incensed and angered. And I think he changed. He asked, from then on he asked, what kind of marriage is this? They're right now talking about whether or not these people are going to sue that bakery. And you know what will happen? Those people's livelihood will be taken away because they stood for what they believed. If they lose their business, those people are to be commended because those people maintained their faith. Thank God we still have people in America that are willing to take a stand and willing to maintain what they believe, no matter what the cost and no matter what the circumstance. We have a very weak-kneed and very milk-toast type of Christianity today. We had a flyer sent to us just recently at our house. And it was from this really edgy church. And it said, "Church for the rest of us." I'm very strongly considering getting either a tract or getting something to send out saying, "Church for all of us." You know what they are saying in that advertisement? Nobody else cares about us. But you know really what the underlying thing is? They're saying, we have church because we don't want to change. We have made choices. We are living a lifestyle. We are doing what we want to do, and we don't want anybody else telling us what to do. And so we're thankful we have a church that just puts their blessing on anything that we want. That church lets people drink. They have activities where they come in and they drink. Right now, probably on their property, because they don't have church going on, but they have opened up their auditorium, and there are probably several kegs in that auditorium right now, and I'm not kidding you. It's a big drunken bash. In the name of God.